Hey everyone, first, thanks a lot to SideFX, thanks a lot to FMX. This is a celebration for me of all the cool stuff that we do. Thanks a lot to everyone who came in. Yeah, hopefully this will be something interesting for you guys. So I have changed up the title a little bit because there's not going to be just one thing that we're going to be talking about. It's kind of everything that we have been doing recently with Houdini, which is some of it is maybe something that's expected, some of it might not be. So hopefully this will be a little bit more interesting. So that's me. I have been doing Bottleship VFX since 2013. This has been before I did a stint in Pixmondo in Scanline for a while, but I really wanted to start my own company, so that's what eventually transpired. And we have been having history of doing a lot of complex simulation-heavy work in features mostly, but eventually this grew up to include a lot of procedural stuff like environments, character effects like waving hair and cloth, etc. And is growing since animation also, and so on. And we used to be Max-centric, but since 2019, like late 2019, we have converted. I mean, we didn't switch, we converted really because there is a bit of a religious thing, obviously, and nowadays also to Solaris for the last couple of months. So the thing that you're gonna see in this presentation is the way we use Houdini in all of these different things that we do. So there's going to be some nights of the Zodiac where there would be energy effects, illuminant plasma streams, and so on. There's going to be Comandante where the Houdini was used to do lighting and scene assembly. There is some interesting new technology there that it is exciting to share. And there is a new software development project that we do actually, which uses Houdini as a motion synthesis tool. So starting with Knights of the Zodiac, kind of the most traditional of all of these projects. So this was a production from Sony, directed by Tomek Baginski, about 60 million budget overall. There is a cult anime with the same name from the 80s, and it was important to keep faithful to the anime. So we did a lot of 3D work and a lot of effects work on it. Comp was mostly done by Redefine, but we did a dozen shots or so. All the 3D we did in Houdini. We rendered with V-Ray and Mantra. So this was before the USD days and Solaris. So V-Ray was mostly for the surfacing because complex lighting, it's fast for us to render in V-Ray. And Mantra was with all the volumes and the plasma kind of things that we're going to be talking about now. And there is a lot of cool stuff, destruction with assets, so you can build a lot of depth, lots of fun stuff like trees, but let's talk about the energy this time. And it's called Cosmo in this film, and it's very important because at the end of the film, this is what is telling the story about Athena, our female lead, becoming the goddess, transforming, like kind of her inner power starts manifesting externally. And the male lead, Seiya, is trying to crawl his way into her through this energy, which is flowing like a river around him to save her from going too far, basically. Sequence is huge. Like when I saw it in the theater, I thought this is way too long, like half an hour. So this Cosmo energy has a few different appearances in the sequence. There is a vortex around Athena. There is some energy which is streaming down Seiya, like an interactive element that is showing the kind of the force which is being applied to him that he's resisting. There is a river that he is wading through. So all of these different things, there's some things that connect them, which are going to be focusing on. So conceptually, the director wanted to have something like astrophotography because it's quite a popular thing. It looks very pretty. There is a great mixture of additive, kind of plasma-ish, and density volumetric. It's highly complex, and it fits the style of the movie. It's a Cosmo energy, so makes sense. And we were looking at a lot of these references, kind of a nebula kind of things, but eventually we went into a little bit of a different direction just because of these things like physics. So it's not real physics, it's movie physics, but you have to ground it in something real, so it does look convincing. But always goes a little bit farther just because it needs to be stronger, faster, more exciting. And we think about the effect that we ended up with as plasma. If you go into YouTube and you search around, you see a lot of applications of real plasma. So this is basically a superheated gas that is electrically charged and is emitting light just because it's superheated. Okay, so all these different places. There is the Cosmo Vortex, which is happening around Athena. We had different sizes of shots. So this one is kind of medium. There is the streams, like in this shot. There is the river that he is wading through. And then we can talk about the tech. And the art, of course. Excuse the lame AI thumbnails. This is an effect that we have been doing for a while. And back in the day, it was one of the first kind of modern applications were the things that were done by a guy called Richard Bailey. So you guys can check him out. He was really a pioneer and explored a lot of these techniques that we are talking about now. And I think it was in the Superman Returns that this showed up for the first time. And basically, it's an additive effect where you have a lot of points that overlap. Somewhere more points overlap, somewhere fewer, and these different overlaps create these different, added different opacity and color. Back in the day, we used to do it with Krakatoa and Max. Now we do it with Houdini and Mantra. Actually, we also had a Karma implementation since then, but not for this movie. So mostly this is happening as points. Now, volume is actually simpler, just because for ray tracer, it's faster to render a volume. But the problem is that usually it's not detailed enough. So you can always kind of see, and you always push the volume higher, 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 until a point where to get the detail that you see in the point sim, it kind of becomes useless. So the volume is losing its advantages. So most of the time, actually, we do these things as points, the emissive part at least. The density, sometimes the volume is nice. But because it's smoother. But here, I think in this film, we didn't end up using the density component at all. I think we had a few tests where it was kind of promising, but everything is moving so fast, and the streams are interlacing so hard that we didn't really eventually like it. So it's mostly points. And generally, when you do stuff with points like this, there is a simple kind of loop. Source, then forces, then a solver, which makes them move in an interesting way, then some post-production, which is giving the points some attributes that are useful in the shader, curling them, etc., and then the shader. So we're going to go through all of these steps. So the sourcing usually happens from meshes, just because they are very easy to manipulate, and because the character, the animation that you are getting at the input, which is something from the environment or something from the character, usually is meshes. So it's easy to displace and distort and subdivide, etc., just like the volumes. And sometimes sometimes the mesh needs to be closed just because you need, let's say, like a more solid chunk. Then you can close it. You can use points from volume, which has the advantage that is regular. So on some solvers, this irregularity of the points we use as an advantage when it's necessary. Now, of course, this is something that we wrap in an HDA for the actual show, because we do many dozens of shots, and we try to split up the work of development and shot design separately, just because it's a very different mindset that people have. We try not to keep people in like both mindsets, because this makes things very slow. So wrap things up in an HDA and then give it to the people who are going to be doing the shots, and just support them just like you support a software application. So then the forces, we usually start with some kind of a some kind of a volume, basically all the interesting part of the scene that you want this effect to happen in, you can just bound it and you can put in points into it and then comb some vectors on them. A lot of times it's also convenient to do some analytical forces. If you can express them analytically, like distances to things, some noise functions, this can save you from writing volumes. These are not, very heavy volumes, but anyway, just analytical is even faster, so it's more convenient. If you do go the volume way, there you can do mixing, distortions, etc., like cool design thingies. So then eventually it goes back to a volume, because if you sample this volume, obviously points are not efficient, so you sample the velocity from the points. If this was convenient, yet for me it is more convenient than volumes. There's more tools. Sample back to the volume, just because sampling it over time across many points is faster. By the way, all of these how-to things, I'm going to be going through them quite quick. So afterwards, anything that you guys want to have a better understanding of, or you want like even test scenes, etc., I'm going to be around. I can explain and I can send scenes. The volume goes back to the .NET just to get some velocity sourced upon the points, and you could remove divergence from this volume or not. Sometimes with these kind of solvers, actually, some divergence is nice because it doesn't happen everywhere, and it makes your points sometimes come into these streams, which are becoming more defined. Well, if you completely remove the divergence, it becomes kind of smooth, and you don't get these accumulations of points at some places, which for this exactly effect is nice. So I think we didn't remove the divergence here. And then eventually the solver, so it is making the points behave in a fluid way. Obviously, if you just advect the points using this volume, you're going to get the basic motion, but you're not going to have the small vortices in between the points, which are making it look fluid and cool. Fluid is always expensive, and just simple advection and noise is always cheap. So we always want to have some solver on top of them. Depending on the kind of motion that we're looking for, we used a couple of different solvers. So when you want this kind of splashy, running, watery-like motion, for example, here in this vortex around the thinner, we use the flip solver because the shapes, these kind of streaky running shapes, these are looking good. At places where we wanted to have it more sheet-like and more cellular, there we use the pop fluid. It's something that happens often, actually. You're going to see also in the other show. And eventually Pyro when we want softer, broader look. So eventually, when we get to post, there is a bit of a divergence, because you could do all these things, the advection parts, etc. You could do with volumes and with points. But eventually, when you get to post-processing, you have to treat them a little bit differently. Because with the volumes, if you have some pyro, then you just have a density. But with points, you need to rasterize them because they are just points. And that's in case you want to render as a volume. I made a little bit convoluted here. That's not really necessary. If you do points, you just go with points. So an important part is that it is not usually the same amount of points that are most effective for rendering and for simulation. So when you design the motion first, you really care about the simulation. You want to have enough detail there, but pumping too many points through it actually is making things slower, and obviously it's making things slower, but even worse, at some point the motion becomes worse. So it's most successful. It has been most successful for us when we focus on creating great motion at the point stage, and then rasterizing this to a velocity volume and running a big number of points, which are then good for the rendering, like the rendering count points, which are tens of millions usually range, on this velocity field. And then you can decouple these two requirements, and you don't need to worry about how things look when you're still at the motion stage. I see often people fall into this trap that they have a good looking motion, but when they render it, the points are too few, so just pump a lot of points through the simulation. They wait a long time, and then the look is not exactly the same. So it usually smooths out, and you lose the small shapes. So this is the way to avoid that. And of course, this is much faster because advecting this large point cloud through the velocity volume is very quick, and it's even parallelizable. So on the farm, you have a bunch of machines. You can run a different advection on each of these machines with different random seeds for the source. So it's even better. Eventually, at the end, we kill some points, because when you do this kind of advection, when the point leaves the velocity field, it stops, or you have to give it some other force. But usually we just delete it, because there is nothing as interesting outside of the velocity field as the motion that we have just designed with the velocity field. It's carefully designed. The solvers are doing some cool stuff. So either when they leave, you give them some simpler motion and you kill them after a few frames, or just you straight away kill them. It's not usually a huge problem, because none of the points are at a density which is actually visible. Like, you don't see a single point ever. You only see these accumulations of points. And of course, this is making the points being tens of millions on the dozens of shots. So it's very important to make the file size smaller. So usually you kill all the attributes that you don't need. You downsample everything to the lowest bitrate that is doable. Velocities go to 16-bit, and positions need to stay at 32-bit. But other attributes that you use in the shader, like age, etc., everything goes to 16-bit or even less, even lower. So then, when we render with Mantra, everything is packed as primitives. Nowadays with Solaris, it's just use these. Actually, it's simpler. It would be cool to talk someday about USD workflows with the points. Volumes shader is just a density shader. There is nothing emissive, I think, in the volumes that we rendered here. There is some cool stuff like our in-house tools that make the calibration of the density volume simpler, just because I don't know why we don't see this at many places, but when you need to make some density curve, like remap your density, it's not obvious what the maximum density is. And we try to do it analytically by volume reduce, but it's giving you the maximum value that any voxel anywhere has, and usually somewhere near the source, the values are very high, but this is not the practical maximum value. So the only thing that has worked for us is to make a false color mode. So you just have a red to green gradient override button that you click, and the blue in the middle, and you just move change the value until you see all the three colors in the render. And this is a very simple thing to explain to an artist. Otherwise, there is always lots of arguments about how to do this. But this way, if you see all the three colors, then it's calibrated correctly. So then you can do your remapping. So I think this is the one thing that I am not seeing being done everywhere, which is very useful. So with the points, their shader is very, very simple. Back in the Mantra days, we used the constant shader. Nowadays, with Material X and Karma, we use the unlit shader. But the point is that this is something which doesn't cast shadows, so it doesn't have anything interesting in the color. There is just the opacity and the base color, which interplay in some interesting ways. And we use some attributes just to modulate these two things, color and opacity, just to give it some interest, because you don't want to have the thing flat. And the important thing here is that there is a very delicate thing that happens between the opacity and the color. So the correct way that I feel like is the best way that we have found to work with it is that you dial your opacity first, and you're only looking at the alpha channel of the image. Just because if you try to dial the opacity and the color together, you find the correct color, but then the opacity is wrong, and then you find the correct opacity and the color is wrong. And this is because higher opacity makes the colors brighter. and this is why, you know, trying to nail both at the same time is a shooting at a moving target. Instead, we first give the color some normalized value between 0 and 1, so that you like the hue of the color. And then you dial the opacity, you find the opacity that you like, and then you multiply the color by something so that you get the correct brightness. And this is very, very, very easy, and it doesn't lead to back and forth. So you're going to save a lot of, you know, hair pulling. Okay, then the last thing I think we do to the shader is that we don't really like the way that the streams are being a little bit too smooth. So adding only on a few of the points quite a lot of more opacity makes it so that these kind of glittery stars appear in the cloud that feels very nebula-like and very star-like. So this is, I guess, one of the few things that we actually pulled from the reference eventually. But you can see that here it's quite visible. Even more in the comps, like the comp people get a separate control for these, so they can amplify or make them make them softer if necessary. But it's definitely something which makes the whole thing much richer. And eventually you have to render, but I have written here a bunch of things that are kind of lessons learned from all of these shows, that these effects are something that is, you know, this is energy. So always you have to ask yourself the question, this thing that I'm making, is it matter? Is it energy? What is it? And that's why we talked about the physics in the start, because without that, there's lots of questions that you give bad answers to, and you start doing silly things like emissive volumes that flatten things out, and it's not looking nice. So we have to keep in mind that this effect, which does not have any shadowing, is means that any gradients and any detail that you see is between positive and negative space. Usually when something has a shadow, you know, the volumes, density volumes do have a shadow, so you have a gradient between the lit and the unlit and the shadowed part. But with this kind of a plasma, because it does not cast a shadow, the difference is only between the positive and negative space. And there are problems with making negative space, actually. So here I also mentioned that there is a cool opportunity if you actually do a mixture of these and the density volumes, like I said earlier, but we didn't get to do that on this show. I'm trying to remember why. Maybe we just maybe we hit the vortex looking good, and then nobody wanted to touch it anymore. They said, like, okay, this is good, let's not do anything else. So the issue with the negative space that you have, that you need to design, is that when you source the points and you source them in some kind of a three-dimensional shape, if you cut in negative space at one depth, let's say, and there is no negative space at another depth, let's say you have a ball and the ball is cut off on the left side, you know, nearer to you, and then it's not cut off on the left side farther from you. Because this thing does not have any shadow, these things just overlap, and you don't see any depth in it, and the back side, which is filled, is filling up the front side, which is not filled at this place. So basically, everything becomes smooth. So to get rid of the smoothness, one of the easiest things that you can do is to flatten things out. So in any shot that is like this, that is very sideways, which actually we prefer, you know, always VFXy things, you want to have the motion happening across the frame if possible and not in depth. We flatten these things out, and we have like several layers at different depths. And when these are flat, it's very easy to make them, you know, very kind of sharply cut and very detailed. While when we can't do that, when we need some more, you know, three-dimensional volume, or the motion is both sideways and in depth, like in the vortex, we try to have the points coalesce in streams which are very defined, and they leave gaps in between the streams. So this is the chance there to make something which does not, you know, overlap. So you don't want any soft and blurry and spread out areas, and this is why the flip solver, generally the fluids, liquidy kind of solvers are better than the pyro, because pyro evens things out. And if you have a big amount of points, yeah, you try to cut them with some rest noise, based on rest, or make the source very contrasty. But eventually, over a few frames, the whole thing smooths out. So yeah, the flip is better for these kind of motions usually. I mean, you can have a pyro component that does not have too many particles, so before it starts smoothing out, but overall. Here, I've been in a mood when I was doing these comments. Okay, so kind of this was it for the energy effects. We do them often. It's always a little bit different. It's very enjoyable, very interesting. Okay, so here in Comandante, which is the next show that we will be talking about, things are a little bit different. So that's kind of how the end result looks like. We have printed in the camera data for reasons that you're going to see in a bit. All the stuff that it automates. But yeah, you get the idea of what the show is like. So it's a World War II period film, which is set in the Mediterranean Sea, where the captain of the submarine refuses to follow orders, and after kind of in self-defense sinking an enemy ship, he rescues all the sailors. It's been produced by Pier Paolo Varga, directed by Eduardo De Angelis. Our VFX supervisor was Kevin Haug. And it was quite challenging and innovative because the thing was shot on location in a naval base in South Italy. So if you guys went and saw the virtual production talk with our Flag Means Death, people, they told you never shoot in the ocean. And we also tried to convey this message, but unsuccessfully. At least we're not in the middle of the ocean. We were on a pier, but still we were outside. There was wind, there was rain, clouds, all kinds of weather. You can't pull out green screens. There is no LED stages, and we had to still do this kind of virtual production show. So the set itself is an actual submarine which is bigger than the real submarine. Like, I've heard of miniature, but these guys actually did the reverse miniature. I'm not even sure how this is called, but they built a bigger one, and the crew is running around the ship. Mostly that's what's happening. The camera is following them. There is dollies, there is technocranes, and eventually in the film there is 40 minutes of virtual backgrounds, because we end up replacing the sky, the sea. Obviously the submarine is staying in place on the pier, and we need to make it go with particular speed. So we do this by making the ocean move rather than we make a virtual submarine that the camera is on, move through the ocean. So all of this had to be replaced. Of course, there is also airplanes. There's gunfire, explosions in the water near us. The enemy ship is sinking. Crazy stuff. So what we implemented was that the director, on the side in his director's monitor, has a composite. And this composite shows him the talent, basically the stuff which is in camera, and a background which is rendered in Unreal, overlaid, and he can order adjustments. So he can say, I think in this sequence the ship should be moving faster, or the sun should be lower, this kind of stuff, or the waves should be higher. And then he starts shooting. And afterwards, at the end of the day, selected takes are being sent to post-production, which is something that relies on presets that we have built in pre-production, approved by the director, Houdini Ocean, some skies, etc. And we just switch the camera and we re-render them from Houdini, and we prepare a composite now with the actual frames from the camera, not the video, and the new backgrounds. So we managed to deliver 37 shots while the film was still shooting on set, compared to 4 months later. And it's something that we are kind of proud of. So we are making a development on this. But I also wanted to throw in a little bit of a making of here, just so there's things that are useful for people. So on these shows, we always start with usually with the spectrum, but especially when you have a little bit of a storm, which is, for us, we have never had to do calm seas. There's always in the middle of the ocean, ships are getting wrecked, lightning, etc. So we need to always add life to the ocean surface, and especially when there's too many shots, you don't want to do like full flip simulations on each of these shots. We try to see what we can do first with something that's very basic and that can be done in lighting in the scene assembly, in rendering only, and can make the ocean alive. And then the better we do at this stage, the fewer in-shot simulations we have to do. So what we found out is that obviously, yes, there is foam on the surface of the ocean. This is making it alive, so it's not just one smooth thing. And the way a very simple way that we have found to create foam is using the pop fluid solver. So we force it to become two-dimensional just by, you do a pop angle, you say p.y becomes 0, so this makes the solver 2D. This is making it faster and is exactly, and creating these kind of shapes, because here we see the same effect that we just talked about. If things are three-dimensional, overlaying on each other, it's much more complicated, and things are, for these kind of effects which are kind of flat, like this one also, having things overlay at different depths is actually destroying your detail. So you want these sharp cutouts, and making things flat helps also here. So yeah, we flatten it out and we seed some holes because you source, with some noise, let's say, and your source is usually too flat. And the pop fluid is very good at creating these surface tension lines and circles. But this circle needs a hole in the middle, so the points around it can coalesce into this line. So you just remove some points here and there randomly in the beginning of their lifespan, and you end up with like Swiss cheese source. And this is very good for the pop fluid. So like I said earlier, the same thing applies, that you only design it with the motion in mind when you are doing the motion. And afterwards, you make it to a velocity volume and advect a bunch of points through it, which where you are looking at how it looks. Again, here they need to have very small p scale. They need to have certain opacity, and with the number of points that you need for rendering, you can never sim it in a practical time. I mean, or you're not going to be happy doing it. So once you have this cell, this is the thing that you can see on the right side. I have cut out, obviously, the start and ends of the simulation, because these simulations, you need always some pre-roll. In the beginning, it doesn't look very good. And then you can either render this as a texture, and you can slap it here and there, or you can copy 2 points on some points from your ocean surface, and then displace it with the spectrum, so it takes the shape of your ocean, and render it together with the basic ocean. We had to do. I don't think we managed. There was something in the ocean shader that we reverse engineered, but eventually it didn't completely work. Yes, because in the ocean shader, the point's actually changing the color of the ocean. So this didn't really work for us. So we made another geometry basically that has all of these copies, and then it's getting displaced, and it is getting opacity cut. Nowadays in Karma, we are still developing how this thing would happen, but with the ocean procedural, actually, this is simpler. So you can do both of these methods: the points method or the textures, which is basically grids that have these textures on top, and you display the collection of grids. Both of these should work with the ocean procedural. And sometimes it is even better to make it more meaningful. That's something that we have, philosophically distilled from all of these VFX years, that you need to create connections for the things to have complexity. And these connections are, for example, here in the ocean surface, if you just splat these points everywhere on the ocean, okay, it's better than nothing, because it now is foamy. But it is even better if you connect them to where the white cap of the wave has just been. And if you just do the straightforward ocean surface displacement, because it does not have any history, the wake is there, and then after it moves away, there is nothing there anymore. So the next frame, the place that the wake just used to be is empty. But if you trail off some points from these wakes using the cusp, and then place these foam cells on top of these points, you're going to have a really good result. And this is actually better than trying to, because this is working with a very small number of points. Like if you try to create this detail by trailing points from the actual cusp inside the camera frustum, this is heavy simulation. While if you just trail a few points and instance these foam cells on top of them, you can do it very quickly. We just have an HDA that we give to the lighting people, and they hit a button, they wait 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20, and they have enough of these points, so it never goes to effects and to simulation people. So you can do it as a part of your lighting process, and it really makes the ocean surface alive and only leaves the extra work for the shots that are close-ups or like special in some kind of way. So back to the strategic plan of the whole thing is that we eventually we finished the movie in I think only 4 months after the principal photography was over. It was in Venice in the film fest, opening the film fest, which was really great and very unprecedentedly short for this kind of work. And when we showed to the people to the camera image, there is this conference with the DOPs, directors of photography, come in, and when we show it to them, they say, yeah, this is similar to shows that we do with a LED stage. It's a pain in the ass because the LED stage is so expensive, and they sold it to us, based on that you're not going to need any post-production. But there is a bunch of shots where you do need post-production just because the LED stage is very restrictive to the camera work. You can't really focus in the distance. You can only focus on your characters. You have to keep the background very defocused. And a lot of times, the DOPs and the directors don't really want to care about that. They want to focus on the distance, like they don't have these dramatic focus pulls. There's also the issue that you want something to render on the background, especially on these kind of ocean shows that they cannot render real time. There is the approach to actually render one flat 360, but we felt like because that on our show that we had so many dolly and technocrane moves of the camera, which were big along the axis of the ship, we felt like this would lack too much parallax, so the whole thing would feel flat. So we wanted to have a 3D ocean that when the camera moves, you can look on different sides of the waves. And definitely this cannot happen in real time. But also the people who operate these Unreal setups on virtual stages, they are coming usually not from film. They're coming from games, something like this, real-time applications, and they are not as sensitive with lighting and with composition as film people are. And this sometimes leads to some frustrations. Then the last thing is that they don't really account for any post-production. So once you are back from the virtual production set, if you need to go to post-production, which you do need often, then you just left to your own devices to rebuild the whole thing again. So it takes a lot of time and money. And learning these lessons, we moved to version 2 of the technology. And this is a test that you can see here that was made just for our show here, because it's still work in progress, but we wanted to show kind of how it shapes up. So the first thing that you saw was the plate that was kind of what the camera sees. Then this is what the camera sees. Then the second one with the gray background, etc., is the real-time composite. So this is what the director sees in his monitor, and he can ask for, let's say, lighting to change, props to be moved around. Anything like that, and this is getting addressed in real time before he starts shooting. Once he's happy with it, the shoot starts, and the offline comp gets delivered on the next day. So then the offline comp is the last thing that you saw in the breakdown. This guy. Sorry about the 5-minute environment build. So the improvements here are that the depth is much better. We used to not have any depth at all. So we now have a depth camera that we attach to the main film camera, and this lets us separate in real time without any processing, any AI inference, anything like that, the background from the foreground. And when you go to the offline, when we don't need to be real time, then we can run some AI models that are doing both segmentation, which separate the character from the rest of from the props. If you want to not have any of the stuff at the foreground, at the same distance that the character is. Like here, you see the desks. So the segmentation model helped us remove the desks, and the depth from image model helped us get a decent roto of the guy that can be used for editorial or kind of almost until the end of the movie when some very particular masks need to be very finely touched, and you send only this part to the guys who are doing roto. Much less work. On the rendering side, we replaced Unreal with Houdini and Vantage. So Vantage is the V-Ray which is optimized for real-time rendering. You get the Unreal frame rates, but without the game engine. So it's full path tracer. Almost most of the bells and whistles. It doesn't do a bunch of things, like it doesn't do volumes, it doesn't do deforming geometry. But it's a good enough preview that you see with ray tracer, with the correct lighting, shadows, everything, so that when you do your renders with all the bells and whistles the next day, you're not surprised in any way. And the whole thing runs into Houdini so that we can build our environments and we can see them real time in Vantage on one side. And after the shoot, we can just run a TopsNet that is replacing cameras, etc., and gives us the render for the comp. And the most important thing is that there is no gap. There is no one definition of the set in Unreal for virtual production, another that you have to rebuild basically from scratch almost in Houdini. Everything is just one piece. The guys that we partner with in optics-wise, Cook, they have another huge set of very cool things that are happening that I didn't really touch too much upon, but basically the very, very beautiful anamorphic lenses, which have been very difficult to do VFX with, they are now, because they distort differently every time that you turn the focus ring or the aperture ring, their software makes it so that you get distortion every frame, which is the correct distortion. And we get so much metadata from the lens that we feed it to the defocus algorithm after, and you get in nuke all of the bokeh and very cool defocus automatically happening on the virtual background, just like it happens on the plate, on the photography, and with zero effort, which is amazing. So they are going to have a new version of their toolset, and we're integrating it into our offering. And I hope that we are going to have a full demo soon with some sexier people on screen. No, never mind the guy. The guy is cool. So I have to say thanks here because the whole thing is a partnership. So Kevin Hawk and Doug Stump, they were supervising. Kevin was supervising, and they helped also on the founding principles of this whole approach. Sen and Kerry and Jordan from Cook helped us with all of these lens magic. Tim and Jonathan from EasyTrack are taking care of the camera tracking, which is also, I feel like, very cool inside out. So it's very accurate. It doesn't rely on external sensors. Vlado at Chaos helped move the development on their side with all the extra things that we needed to address, and the side effects support for being extremely fast. Like I just shoot these guys an email sometimes, and in an hour there is an answer which is just amazing. Like can't believe most of the times. And the last thing that I want to show is, do we have some time a little bit? Is something called Cairos. So what is that? We started with the challenge that the character animation that we have been doing more and more of recently, and because we're coming from kind of technical background, so we do a lot of motion capture. And we figured, okay, this is very time-consuming something. I think traditionally it's very valuable. And a lot of times we had built, using KineFX, new animation from these existing pieces, just adjusting them a little bit, adding some transforms on top. But to do that, you need to have access to a lot of motion capture data. You need to be able to have the technical skills to assemble them. It's not for everyone, for sure. And what if there was a platform that you can pull on all of this deep well of animation data that we already have and that we can add to every day, and it doesn't require any expertise to combine them. So you don't need the Houdini skills. And these days, obviously, the hot thing to do is to get the chatbot to talk to, and that's what we built. So there's a short demo here on the background. On the left side, you can see the chatbot window, and that's where you talk to your character. And after it has parsed your requests, it is actually creating some. It is doing a database lookup, which turns out to be not trivial. So the point is that the language model is very smart about words, and it can retrieve something from the database in a much better way than traditional searching with keywords, just because it is actually doing semantically similar. It's pulling out semantically similar entries, even if they are described with completely different words, which is really great. And then it collects all of these entries that it has found, and it sends it to Houdini as a table of parameters. And then this table is used by Houdini to assemble all of this motion, render out GLTF and FBX, and deliver the GLTF to you for to look at in the browser. And because we can render out GLTFs and FBXs, we can integrate with any platform. Kind of simple. Here you can see the Houdini setup. There is a loop which is going through all the motions that it found that were found in the input JSON, and it is sequencing them using the sequencing tools. Of course, it's possible to do some layering. So use different motions for different parts of the body. And we are thinking about faces just because they seem that are approachable in this manner. The iPhone's facial motion capture system relies on a face which is rigged with a particular set of blend shapes, and it is returning the animated mix of each of these 52 blend shapes. So we figured this is just a 52-dimensional vector. Just like the usual transforms that we get, this is one more transform, just with a little bit of a few extra dimensions. And this means that you can blend these things, you can remap them, so you can amplify or de-emphasize a particular part of a pose of the face, etc. So it looks like this is doable, and this can be retargeted to any face that uses the same facial rig. And here in this demo, you basically see that. The guy at the prompt says warm up for a while and then do a little bit of shadow boxing. So that's what the character does. He warms up for a little bit and then he does some shadow boxing. Now, of course, these are just kind of proof of concept. At this stage, we are looking for some financing to fund the whole thing, to go through like a year development cycle to assemble, to accumulate all the data and present in a nice way. But it's something that we use Houdini for just because it's now part of our DNA, and it's a little bit less than usual. Okay, so thanks a lot again to ZFX and to the FMX for the invite. Thanks a lot to you guys for being here. And if you want to get in touch, there is bottleshipvfx.com, which is our main site. There is Cairos VP, which is the virtual production thing. Cairos.ai, which is the motion synthesis site. And you can find me on social media if you have any questions, if I can help out with anything. So thanks a lot.
So cool. So cool. Any questions? Yeah.
Lovely presentation, by the way, covering a ton of nice stuff. How have you found the Easy Track to be in terms of like, is there cabling that does it? Is it all wireless? I've not had any experience with that.
So it relies on motion controllers which are encoding the motion. So we had 3 types of rig. One of them was the pan tilt head, which is doing your just tripod motions. One of them was a dolly, where the camera was on a sled, and one of them was a crane. So all of these cameras had a motion encoder. That's why inside out rather than outside in tracking, and it encodes at each frame which is gen lock time synced. The motion, and this time sync, then you can sync with the time code in the frames, and you can find out what the camera position at each of the frames is. And they have a box which aggregates actually the metadata from these different camera rigs, and the metadata from the lens, from the Cook lens, and the metadata from the camera. So we have it at one place, and then we burn it into the XRs of the frames. So when you get the frame, the XR frame, you have all of the camera and lens data into the frame. You can extract literally the camera from the XR, from the plate. And if, let's say, your range changes, so there is no camera tracking. You used to work on this frame range, then you work on this frame range, you just hit a button and the camera is getting extracted from the XRs.
It's exciting. So it's all hardware based.
Yeah, it's hardware based.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the stuff that I've seen that's inertial based and optical and stuff like that, it all just feels...
The optical, etc. stuff is good when you have a handheld camera.
Yeah.
So then you need outside-in tracking. We have not managed, these drag guys at least, as far as I know, that's what they use when they do the handheld camera tracking.
And Hristo, you mentioned that the Cairos is, you're looking for investment. Did you mention whether it's available for testing? Like, can people go and try it out? Or?
For now, we still need to do the work which exposes it to external user outside of our network, because there is... It still lives in the VFX company's network, just because sharing resources is it's more expedient, and this makes it so that it has to go through all of the security protocols. So exposing an internally hosted service to the outside world is complicated, and we have to do this kind of work to be able to give it to external customers. But definitely something that is next on our list. We want to have like one customer from each of maybe several potential fields, and address their needs first, and then after we have covered them well enough, open it up into an open beta in let's say a year. But for this coming year, that's something that we want to do, to work with some test clients.
Cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
On the energy fields, it's like very live and purple and colored, and the actors' faces and bodies are very static and monochrome. Was that with the clips you chose, or choice by the director?
It's a mixture of the two, because we only had much move on a very few shots, really. So on some shots there is a double is the entire character. On a shot like this one, for example, we do not have a much move for the face of the guy, just because these kind of much moves are expensive. So we only did illumination on the face of the characters, where we did have much move, and we let on other shots we let the compositing people use just the face that we had on the character, which was sometimes a static face. We let them kind of pick up the light that is going on that face and track it into the moving face of the character kind of afterwards, post factum. Sometimes they did it, sometimes they didn't. Comp-wise, I was not directing the comp, and to me it also feels a little bit flat, but that was the unartistic decision.
Good. Thank you very much, Hristo. Amazing presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.